I was 26 when I first realized that I had always loved her. But the truth is, I didn't know it back then. I had convinced myself that I wasn't the type to fall for someone in such an overwhelming way, that I was too focused on my career and goals to get tangled up in a relationship. But love, as I learned, isn't something you can control. It sneaks up on you, like a soft wind that turns into a storm, until you're caught in the whirlwind. Her name was Clara, and she was my best friend. We met in college, both of us stumbling through the chaos of exams, friendship, and the search for meaning. We were paired together for a group project in our sophomore year, and it didn't take long for us to become inseparable. Clara was everything I wasn't. Fearless, outgoing, unapologetically herself. I, on the other hand, was more reserved, a little cautious, and definitely not someone who put myself out there easily. But somehow, we fit together perfectly. Where I hesitated, she pushed me forward. Where she was bold, I was steady. It was like we balanced each other out in ways I couldn't explain. We spent so many late nights together, studying, talking, sharing stories. I would tell her things I had never told anyone. She would laugh at my dry sense of humor, always encouraging me to be more open, to take risks. And every time I was around her, I felt like I was being pulled into something greater, something more meaningful than anything I had ever experienced before. But the truth was, I never let myself acknowledge it. I never let myself admit that what I was feeling for her was something deeper. It wasn't until our senior year that I realized I'd spent the last few years falling in love with her. But by then it was too late. She was dating someone else, someone who on the surface seemed to be everything I couldn't be for her. Confident, adventurous, and everything she deserved. And well, I was just me. So I kept my feelings hidden, buried deep where they wouldn't get in the way. I watched as Clara grew closer to him, and I smiled through my own heartbreak. It wasn't easy, but I knew that was the way it had to be. I couldn't ruin our friendship. I couldn't risk losing her altogether. We graduated, and she went on to pursue her dreams in a new city. I stayed behind, still trying to find my footing in the world. Time passed, and though we kept in touch, I could feel the distance growing between us. She was living her life, and I was living mine, but in the back of my mind, I always hoped that one day our paths would cross again, and maybe, just maybe, I would have the courage to tell her everything I had kept hidden for so long. 5 years passed. 5 years where life took us in different directions, where I built my career, and she followed her passion for travel and adventure. But there was always that one constant in my life, the thought of Clara. No matter how many people I met, no matter how many times I tried to move on, she was always there in the back of my mind. The love I had for her never faded. It just stayed with me quietly, like a silent promise to myself that I would never forget her. Then, one evening, I received a text. It was from Clara. "Hey, are you free tomorrow? I'm in town for a couple of days, and I'd love to catch up." I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen her in years, and the idea of seeing her again, really seeing her, beyond the messages and the occasional phone call, made my heart race in a way I hadn't anticipated. I immediately agreed, setting a time to meet at a local cafe we used to go to in college. The day of our meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I hadn't seen her since graduation, and even though we had stayed in touch, something about the idea of seeing her face to face made me feel like I was on the verge of something important. I knew I couldn't hide my feelings for her forever. Maybe this was the moment when I would finally tell her how I felt, or maybe I would walk away, pretending that nothing had changed. When Clara walked into the cafe, I felt a jolt in my chest. She looked just as I remembered, vibrant, full of life, with that same easy smile that could light up any room. She hadn't changed a bit, but I had. I had grown, matured, and yet here I was, still holding on to this love that I couldn't shake. She spotted me almost immediately, her face lighting up as she walked over to where I was sitting. "Wow, it's been too long," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look great. It's so good to see you." I smiled, trying to hide the flutter of nerves that danced in my stomach. "It's good to see you too, Clara. It really has been a while." We spent the next hour catching up, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her travels, the places she had been, the people she had met. She had changed in some ways, But in others, she was still the same Clara I had known. Her energy was infectious, and it felt like no time had passed at all. We laughed about old memories, reminisced about our college days, and for a moment it felt like everything was just as it had been. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't help but feel that familiar ache in my chest. The one I had tried to ignore for years. The one that told me I had never really stopped loving her. Finally, after we finished our coffee, Clara leaned back in her chair and looked at me with a curious expression. "So," she said, her tone soft, "tell me, what's been going on with you? Really? I know we've talked a little here and there, but I feel like I'm missing something. You seem different. What's been going on in your life?" I stared at her for a moment, unsure of how to answer. She had always been the person I could confide in, but this felt different. This wasn't just a casual conversation anymore. This was the moment where I would have to decide whether to tell her the truth I had been hiding for so long. Taking a deep breath, I finally spoke. "Clara, I don't know if you've ever realized this, but I've always had feelings for you. Ever since we were in college, I've been in love with you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked as though she didn't know how to respond. I watched the emotions flicker across her face. Surprise, confusion, maybe even a little sadness. "I had no idea," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling the weight of my confession sink in. "I know. I never said anything because I didn't want to ruin our friendship. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't think you'd ever feel the same way. But I've carried this with me for years. And when you texted me today, I realized that I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel this way anymore." There was a long silence, and I braced myself for the rejection I had feared for so long. But then, Clara reached out and took my hand, her grip gentle but firm. "Emma," she said softly, her voice filled with tenderness, "I've always cared about you. I never realized how deep your feelings for me went. But I need you to know that I'm not the same person I was back then. I've changed. We've both changed. And I don't know what the future holds, but I don't want to let go of what we have either." I felt a lump in my throat as I looked at her, unsure of what she meant. You're not rejecting me?" She shook her head. "No, not at all. I think we both need time to figure this out to see where we are now. But I don't want to lose you, Emma. Not like that." And in that moment, I realized that this was not the end of my story with Clara. It was the beginning of something new, something that would take time, effort, and trust to build. But for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that love, real love, was possible. Not in the way I had expected it to happen, but in the quiet, uncertain way that love often comes when you least expect it.